Have you ever felt it? That subtle ripple in the fabric of reality, when the outer world seems to echo the whispers of your soul, when a dream shows up in your morning, or a number keeps appearing in the corners of your vision like some soft fingerprint of fate. You didn't ask for it. You didn't plan it. Yet it arrives again and again, cloaked in symbols, wrapped in meaning. Carl Jung called it synchronicity. Not coincidence, not luck, but something far stranger, more intimate, and deeply unsettling. A collision between the inner and the outer. And once you've noticed it, truly noticed it, your old way of seeing the world begins to dissolve. This is not just about signs. This is about what they're pointing to. You are not as separate as you think. And your mind, your unconscious, is not a private cage. It is a signal tower. Jung believed that what we call chance is often the universe responding to a psychic pattern within us, a resonance, like a key unlocking the same note across the strings of being. Something in you pulls the moment toward itself, and the moment answers. That is synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence, meaningful not because it makes logical sense, but because it hits you like déjà vu and revelation at once. Something inside says, this matters. And yet, it shouldn't. It defies statistics. It defies reason. And it keeps happening. But only when you are ready to see. Think of the times you were at a crossroads, emotionally torn, internally conflicted, trying to hold two truths in one chest. And then someone says a sentence on the radio, in passing, that feels like it was meant only for you. Think of how a book found its way into your hands right when you were breaking. How a stranger seemed to mirror your dream from the night before. Or how, during a death, you saw birds circle and land in formation. The rational mind scoffs. The unconscious pays attention. Because the unconscious does not speak in straight lines. It speaks in images, symbols, and echoes. Synchronicity is the echo. But why does it keep happening? Why do some people see it everywhere, and others never at all? Because to perceive synchronicity, you must already be cracked open. You must be listening not with your ears, but with your intuition. And most importantly, you must be living in alignment or disalignment with something deep, something archetypal. You may not know it, but your life is unfolding along invisible threads. Threads woven by your traumas, your dreams, your repressed desires, your fears, and your unconscious longings. These patterns live in you, and through you, they reach out. They bend time and attention. They magnetize experiences that reflect the very myth you are unknowingly living out. Jung believed we are all characters in mythological dramas, enacting roles given to us by the archetypes we carry. The orphan, the lover, the exile, the king, the trickster. And when an archetype becomes active, when it surfaces from the shadow and begins to guide your inner life, the world responds. You start noticing patterns that match the story your psyche is writing. You don't just see a black cat. You remember the black cat from your childhood dream. You don't just hear a phrase. You feel it thunder against your bones. This is not about superstition. It is about psychic gravity. The unconscious is not passive. It is not a storage room. It is generative. It creates images. It creates tension. And sometimes It creates outer events that match inner symbols. When that happens, when an outer event matches an inner state, and both are connected by meaning, not cause, that is synchronicity. But here's the secret. It happens most intensely when you're on the edge, when you are close to transformation, when your old ego is dying and your soul is about to surface. That's why synchronicity isn't just fascinating. It's dangerous, because it can tempt you to avoid responsibility or inflate your sense of importance. Not every coincidence is a message. Not every symbol is sacred. Jung warned, the ego must be strong enough to perceive synchronicity without becoming possessed by it. Otherwise, you are no longer interpreting the signs. You are being swallowed by them. So why does it keep happening to you? Because something in you is calling out. And the universe is answering, not in words, but in mirrors, in metaphors, in impossible alignments that make no sense but feel undeniably alive. It keeps happening because you are waking up, because your unconscious is no longer content to stay hidden, and because you are nearing a threshold, a moment where you must either deepen into self or return to the sleep of surface life. Synchronicity is not meant to entertain you. It is meant to initiate you. And maybe that's why you're here now, listening, feeling this strange resonance in your bones. Maybe something brought you here, not by accident, but by pattern. And if you feel it, then lean in. This is just the beginning. Subscribe if you haven't yet. This is a path few walk, but many are quietly called to. Leave a comment when you finish. Tell me what part struck you. Because somewhere, someone else is living the same pattern, the same symbol. And maybe, just maybe, you noticing it is what makes it real. The further you drift into this invisible thread, the more reality begins to shimmer. Not like a hallucination, but like a veil that's been pulled back just enough to see the stitching underneath. It's disorienting, beautiful, terrifying. Because synchronicity doesn't just suggest that the universe is listening. It suggests that you're not the only one behind your own eyes. That something ancient, primal, and archetypal is living through you, and that your inner voice, your dreams, your silent obsessions are part of a language far older than words. This language speaks in rhythm, in symbol, in sequence, not logic. And when you tune into it, the rules change. Your doubts may protest. Your rational mind may fight to maintain its authority. But your body knows. It feels it. The eerie timing of that phone call, the exact lyric you needed at the exact second you were ready to fall apart, the object that appears 3 times in one day, in different forms. These are not hallucinations. They are pattern fragments, puzzle pieces. And if you're paying attention, you begin to see that your life is not a straight line. It is a spiral. It returns, repeats, echoes, but never in the same way. Jung once said, "We are living a myth, whether we know it or not." And it's in these moments when the world mirrors your inner state with uncanny precision, that the myth becomes visible. You start to ask, what story am I in? What archetype is active in me now? Who have I become? And who is dreaming me? There's something deeply humbling about this, because synchronicity reminds you, you are not fully in control. The ego, with all its plans and projections, is not the author. It is the actor. It lives inside a drama it barely understands. And synchronicity? It's the stage direction from a deeper source. Not a god above, but a god within, one formed by shadow and symbol and centuries of human longing. A collective inheritance passed down not through blood, but through the architecture of the unconscious. You felt it when a breakup mirrored your childhood wound, when a stranger gave voice to a thought you hadn't yet admitted to yourself, when your dreams predicted events you had no way of knowing. These are not coincidences. These are ruptures, cracks in the illusion of separation. For a moment, the wall between inner and outer dissolves, and something aligns. But with this realization comes danger. Because once you awaken to synchronicity, the temptation to assign meaning to everything becomes seductive. You begin to chase signs, to read omens into every flicker. And in doing so, you risk losing yourself in the very symbols meant to guide you. Jung warned about this. He knew the psyche is not a playground. It is a labyrinth, and those who enter without grounding are often consumed by it. So, what is the proper response to synchronicity? Not blind belief, not skepticism either, but reverent curiosity, a willingness to hold the mystery without strangling it for answers, to allow the symbol to speak without needing to pin it down, to say, I don't know what this means, but I feel it matters, and to let that be enough. That is maturity. That is psychological strength. Synchronicity thrives in liminal space, in the thresholds between endings and beginnings. It appears most often when your ego structure is dissolving, when an identity is dying, when your story is shifting shape. Think of the crisis before a breakthrough, the depression before the insight, the silence before the call. These are portals. Synchronicity lives at their edge. This is why you'll often notice it after a loss, a death, a heartbreak, a betrayal. When the world no longer makes sense, something ancient steps forward to remind you. There is a deeper order beneath this chaos. And that order is not mechanical. It is meaningful. It does not operate on laws, but on resonance. But there's another layer to this, one Jung only hinted at, but we must now confront. Synchronicity doesn't just reflect your psyche. Sometimes it warns you. Have you ever felt pulled toward someone who seemed magnetic, fated, even destined, only to be shattered by them? Have you had dreams that hinted at betrayal, only to see it unfold weeks later? Have you felt an inner no before entering a room, then ignored it and paid the price? Synchronicity is not always comforting. Sometimes it is a scream in disguise, a mirror showing you what you refuse to see. When you are caught in a toxic loop, your unconscious will throw up symbols that echo the pain you are attracting, the shadow you are dancing with. If you ignore them, the patterns repeat, louder, sharper, until the lesson breaks you, or breaks through. So ask yourself, what keeps happening? What themes haunt your life? Not just events, but emotional repetitions. Do you always feel unseen? Betrayed? Not good enough? These are not flaws. These are archetypal wounds. And when these wounds dominate your unconscious, they begin to shape your perception. You start seeing only what confirms the wound, and synchronicity begins to reflect your distortion, not your destiny. This is why shadow work is essential, because until you face what you have buried, you will mistake its echo for a message from the universe. You will follow patterns that feel mystical, but are really just your trauma reenacting itself with new costumes. Jung didn't invent synchronicity to entertain us. He saw it as a sacred phenomenon, a proof that psyche and matter are not separate realms, but two expressions of the same unknown reality. And that reality, whatever name you give it, self, Tao, God, unus mundus, speaks to us through connection, through pattern, through the tension between what we know and what we feel. And that's the key. Synchronicity is not logical. It is not provable. But it is undeniably real. Real in the way that love is real, that grief is real, that a mother's instinct or a soldier's sixth sense is real. It's not real because it can be measured. It's real because it changes you. Because once you've felt it, truly felt it, the world can never go back to being flat. So why does it keep happening? Because you are not who you were pretending to be, and your unconscious is trying to remind you. The dream you had was not random. The song that played was not random. The person who left, not random. The encounter that broke you open, not random. You are in the story of becoming, and synchronicity is the underline. But here's the most important truth. Synchronicity is not about the outer event. It's about the inner recognition. The sign does not change your life. Your awareness of it does. And that awareness begins a shift, a psychological descent into the mystery of yourself. You are not lost. You are being guided, not from outside, but from within. The symbols were always there. You just weren't ready to see. Now you are. There's a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when the world no longer feels like it's happening to you, but through you. The air feels heavier, like it carries messages not meant for the ears, but for the intuition. You walk through a city street, and every face, every flickering light, every torn page on a telephone pole feels like it's been placed there with intention. You're not paranoid. You're not imagining things. What you're experiencing is the world alive. The veil is thinner now. And this is what synchronicity always wanted from you. Not awe, not confusion, but attention. Because once you pay attention, truly pay attention, you begin to remember something your rational mind has worked very hard to forget. You are not a separate self in a dead world. You are a node in a web, a participant in a hidden conversation. And you're not the only one speaking. There's a phrase Jung used, numinous. It means the feeling of the presence of the divine, something deeply sacred, terrifying, and mysterious. Synchronicity is a numinous experience. It collapses the illusion of separation. It shows you the fingerprints of something else, something that doesn't operate by cause and effect, but by meaning, something that orchestrates the external world to echo your internal state, not to manipulate you, but to wake you up, to reveal the story you are in, and the self you are becoming. But what do you do with this awareness? How do you live once you've seen the patterns? Once the illusion of randomness has cracked? First, you must grieve. Yes, grieve. Because there's a kind of death that happens when you truly see. The death of the accidental life. The death of blind suffering. The death of the belief that you're just drifting through chaos. It's painful because once you see the threads, you realize how long you've been asleep to them. You'll remember the moments you ignored the signs, the relationships that screamed through symbols, the dreams you forgot, even as they came true, the warnings you dismissed, and the synchronicities you were never ready to receive. Let yourself feel that. Let yourself mourn the versions of you that couldn't yet see. And then begin again. But this time, not as the ego chasing meaning. Begin as the witness, the participant in a greater unfolding. Jung taught that synchronicity increases in direct proportion to your psychological integrity. That means the more whole you become, the more aligned, the more true to yourself, the more the world begins to mirror that truth. This is not magic. This is psyche. This is the secret law of inner coherence. When your unconscious and conscious minds begin to integrate, your outer world begins to synchronize with your inner clarity. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you are. And what you are is a mystery, a myth unfolding in real time, a soul with its own logic, its own path, its own symbolic language. Synchronicity is the map, not of where to go, but of where you are. It shows you when you're close to yourself, when your choices, thoughts, and presence are vibrating at the same frequency as your unconscious truth. This is why you can't force synchronicity. You can't summon it with rituals or chase it with crystals. It's not a trick. It's a mirror. And it only reflects what you are willing to feel. If you are full of distortion, you will attract distortion. If you are grounded in clarity, synchronicity becomes sharper, cleaner, more profound, not louder, deeper. There's something profoundly terrifying about this, because it means your inner world has consequences. Your denial will show up in the world. Your projections will wear masks. Your fantasies will find actors. The world is not neutral. It responds to the emotional signature you carry. It doesn't judge. It just mirrors. That's why shadow work is not optional. It's the foundation. Until you integrate the parts of you that hide, the resentment, the shame, the manipulation, the fear, you will keep encountering them as fate, the toxic partner, the betrayal, the abandonment, the dream that turns into a nightmare. You will call it bad luck. You will call it chaos. But it's your unconscious, speaking in symbols, asking to be seen. Synchronicity is not a reward. It is feedback, and it is not always beautiful. Sometimes, the most precise synchronicities are the most painful. They point exactly where you don't want to look. They ask you to end things, to leave, to let go, to trust what your mind cannot justify. And this is the final test. Will you follow the thread, even when it leads away from comfort? Will you trust what you feel, even when it makes no sense? Because here is the final truth. Synchronicity does not care about your plans. It cares about your becoming. It will tear down your illusions. It will end relationships. It will destroy your false identities. Not because life is cruel, but because the self you are becoming is demanding to be born. And birth always begins with contraction, with rupture, with pressure, with the old being pushed out. Jung called this process individuation, the psychological integration of the self. And synchronicity is the outer proof that the process is working, that your unconscious is no longer content to whisper. It is now orchestrating, not to control you, but to align you. And what happens when you fully align? Peace. Not the peace of comfort, the peace of coherence, the quiet that comes when you are no longer fragmented, when your actions match your soul, when the people in your life feel like reflections, not distortions, when the dreams you have are not just at night, but in the living world. You become less reactive, more attentive. You begin to move slower, not from laziness, but from reverence. You no longer chase outcomes. You follow symbols. You trust delays. You listen when the world shifts around you. You read the silences. You feel the changes in the field. And you know, not with your mind, but with your being, when something is meant for you. That is the life synchronicity calls you into. Not a life of signs and wonders, but of deep alignment. A life where you don't need constant proof, where one small symbol is enough, because you are tuned in, because you are listening. And one day, without effort, you will realize it doesn't happen to you anymore. It happens through you. You become the synchronicity, the moment that shifts someone's path, the word that cracks their shell, the presence that echoes what they didn't even know they needed to hear. And you won't try to do this. It will simply flow from your alignment. This is the highest calling of synchronicity, not to receive signs, but to become one. And if you feel this now, if these words have opened something in you, then trust that. Not me, not the video, but you. Trust the resonance. Trust that the path you are on, however painful, however uncertain, is not random. You are not lost. You are being rearranged. Until then, stay awake, stay soft, stay open. And remember, you are the symbol you've been waiting for.